The engagement party had just ended, and exhaustion had taken over every fiber of my being. Out of nowhere, my fiancé announced, "I sold our future condo. I gave all the money to my parents for their retirement." I didn't make a scene. That very night, in dead silence, I listed the luxury apartment I owned prior to our relationship for sale. He panicked. "Then where are we going to live?" Ladies and gentlemen, an engagement should be one of the happiest days of a person's life. But what happens if, on the very night of your celebration, you discover the man you're about to hand your life over to is a calculating fraud? That he secretly schemed to strip you of your assets to bankroll his family? Today's story doesn't just expose the bottomless greed of the human heart. It is the chronicle of a flawless, ruthless counterattack by a woman backed into a corner. When her patience ran dry, she laid a perfect trap that would make those who tried to take everything from her pay the ultimate price, leaving them with absolutely nothing. Let me take you through the details of this story. The engagement party concluded, leaving me wrapped in an absolute, bone-deep exhaustion. I dragged my feet back to the luxury suite we had booked at a downtown Chicago hotel to rest after a full day of entertaining guests. As soon as the heavy oak door clicked shut, I kicked off my 4-inch stilettos, letting my swollen, blistered feet sink into the plush carpet. The extravagant engagement gown, weighed down by thousands of crystals, now felt like an iron cage crushing my chest. I walked over to the vanity mirror and began pulling out the bobby pins, holding up my elaborate updo one by one. Seeing the reflection of the drained woman beneath a thick layer of makeup, I sighed. The physical fatigue gave way to a wave of relief washing over my mind. Finally, all the exhausting formalities were over. Only the official wedding next month remained before Vance and I would become husband and wife in the eyes of our families. What made me proudest wasn't the title of wife, but the fact that we had already closed on a gorgeous, sunlit condo in the Gold Coast neighborhood to start our lives together. That place was our dream, the fruit of our savings. We had each put down exactly $100,000 of our own money, planning to pay off the rest of the mortgage together. I closed my eyes, picturing the mornings. Waking up in our sun-drenched kitchen, brewing a fresh pot of artisanal coffee for our new home. The image of that bright future brought a faint smile to my lips. The sound of the electronic door lock abruptly shattered my daydream. The door swung open, and Vance walked in. He was wearing a sharp, custom-tailored charcoal suit, but his silk tie was undone, hanging loosely around the collar of his wrinkled shirt. The moment he crossed the threshold, a heavy wave of alcohol, a pungent mix of bourbon and craft beer, invaded the room. His relatives had pressured him into drinking heavily throughout the reception. He stumbled unsteadily toward the center sofa and collapsed into it. Throwing his head back, he closed his eyes and let out a long, heavy breath. Frowning, I got up and went to the minibar to grab a bottle of chilled water. I cracked it open and handed it to him. He opened his eyes, snatched it, and downed more than half in a single gulp, then slammed the glass bottle onto the coffee table. The sharp clack echoed in the quiet room, startling me. Vance sat up straight, clasping his hands over his knees. He stared at me with an intensity that completely contradicted his drunken demeanor from moments ago. His eyes now held a chilling, terrifying sobriety. He cleared his throat, breaking the silence. "I have something to tell you, Alara. It's important. Sit down." His voice was low and flat. Without a hint of hesitation, I pulled up an upholstered armchair and sat across from him, instinctively crossing my arms over my chest. My years in the corporate sector told me that this posture from Vance meant nothing good. I kept my face impassive, waiting. "I sold our Gold Coast condo." Vance dropped the sentence as casually as if he were announcing he'd bought a new phone. I froze. The air around me seemed to thin out. My hands went numb instantly. The only sound I could hear was the slow, rhythmic rush of blood in my ears. It felt like an invisible hand was squeezing my heart. I blinked rapidly, trying to logically process the words that had just left the mouth of the man I was about to marry. The condo was in both our names. The closing paperwork was sitting in the safe at my place. How could he have sold it without my consent? I took a deep breath, forcing my racing chest to calm down, fighting to keep my voice from cracking. "Run that by me again?" "We literally just got the keys last week. The deed has both our names on it. My signature is on that paper. How exactly did you sell it without me being present?" I interrogated him, enunciating every word with a razor-sharp clarity. Vance offered a dismissive smirk. He grabbed a pack of cigarettes from the table, slowly pulled one out, and lit it. The gray smoke he exhaled partially obscured a face that was finally revealing its true, calculating nature. I have a buddy who's a notary public. I had him draw up a forged power of attorney with your signature. The title company pushed the transfer through yesterday. The buyers are an out-of-state LLC looking for an investment property. They wired the $200,000 cash down payment straight to me this afternoon, right before your folks showed up to the party. Vance explained with a nonchalant shrug, looking as smug as a lottery winner. His sheer audacity and the magnitude of the fraud churned my stomach. Nausea was the only sensation I could register. $200,000. Of that massive sum, $100,000 was my blood, sweat, and tears. It was the result of 6 years of relentless grinding, working days and nights, saving every dime. It was the foundation, the future I had built for our little family. And he had the nerve to secretly forge legal documents to hijack it in the most cowardly way possible. Where's that $200,000 right now? What did you do with it? I hissed through clenched teeth. I balled my hands into fists under my dress, digging my nails into my palms to stop myself from lunging forward and slapping that mask of false morality off his face. I wired it all to my mom's account back in Indiana, Vance replied, his arrogance unshakable. My mother spent her whole life working her fingers to the bone to raise me. She's older now, her joints ache. I couldn't let her keep living in that damp, rotting farmhouse downstate. I used the money to buy her a nice, newly built ranch house in town with a big backyard so she can garden and enjoy her retirement. With the leftover cash, she's setting up a high-yield savings account under her name as a medical emergency fund. My jaw dropped. The words caught in my throat. He took my $100,000, combined it with his, and handed it all over to his mother to buy real estate and pad her bank account. He was playing the role of the ultimate devoted son funded entirely by the sweat and tears of his future wife. He made the executive decision to steal our joint marital assets behind my back, treating me like a mindless ATM. That lie, that betrayal, struck me like lightning in a clear sky. The entire facade of a decent, responsible man shattered in a split second, turning to ash on the very night we celebrated our commitment. Silence gripped the hotel suite, broken only by the soft hum of the HVAC unit, blowing cold air that couldn't compare to the ice spreading from the depths of my heart. I stared at Vance, searching in vain for a flicker of guilt or remorse. But there was nothing, only the self-satisfaction of someone who believes they possess the moral high ground. Seeing my prolonged silence, Vance stubbed out his half-smoked cigarette in the glass ashtray. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, and began lecturing me with the archaic, patriarchal logic his family had instilled in him. Alara, don't look at me like that. This isn't a big deal. The most important thing in a marriage is love and respect. A few bucks don't matter, he said condescendingly, adopting the tone of a magnanimous patriarch. Think about it. You already own that luxury condo in River North, right? The one you bought before we met? The location is prime, the layout is modern, and most importantly, the school district is top tier for our future kids. It's a win-win. When my mom visited last month, she couldn't stop raving about it. She said it was a crime for a place that huge to just house 2 people. Vance paused, monitoring my expression, before continuing his psychological manipulation. If we're a family, there's no yours and mine. What you bring to the table builds our shared future. Me selling the new place to take care of my folks is a solution that benefits everyone. You get to fulfill your duty as a daughter-in-law by providing for them, and we solve our housing issue by moving into your place. My mom always says that when a woman marries, she has to put her husband's family first. You're a highly educated corporate director. Surely you understand these basic principles, right? Every word spilling from Vance's mouth felt like a poisoned needle piercing my eardrums. Everything clicked into sharp, devastating focus. This wasn't an impulsive, drunken mistake. It was a meticulously orchestrated conspiracy by his entire family. Their greed was beyond human comprehension. They had been eyeing my premarital real estate for months. My River North condo, valued at nearly $850,000, which I had aggressively paid down over the years, was their actual target. In Vance's narrow, selfish mind, my premarital assets automatically converted into a communal trough for his family to feed from. He used the concept of what's yours is mine to justify embezzling my $100,000 in cash. Then, he intended to force me to hand over my personal real estate so his entire bloodline could migrate there. His parasitic mindset was wrapped in a sickening cloak of family values. He stripped me of my hard-earned money to play the hero to his mother, expecting me to sacrifice my sanctuary to house his freeloader relatives. The fact that my future mother-in-law was actively coveting my luxury condo proved her bottomless avarice. They didn't see me as a family member. I was a cash cow, a gold mine to be excavated until it collapsed. I sat up straight. The disbelief in my eyes hardened into absolute, freezing contempt. Looking at the man in front of me, I saw a total stranger. Vance didn't love me. He loved my portfolio. He used the concept of marriage as a leash to force me to bow my head and surrender my independence. Their united family was just an exploitation contract with no expiration date. I inhaled the frigid air, locking down the rage threatening to explode, and prepared to flip the board on them. I didn't cry. Not a single tear fell for a man who didn't deserve it. Inside me, the 6 years of youthful affection for Vance evaporated into dust. The death of trust is usually accompanied by screaming and sobbing, but I chose a terrifying silence. A cornered animal doesn't make noise. It strikes. I stood up, calmly smoothing the wrinkles from my dress. I walked over until I was standing right in front of him, so close I could smell the stale alcohol radiating off his skin. I looked down at him, driving my icy stare into his smug face. The morality you and your family operate on is truly enlightening. Forging legal documents to sell our joint property, laundering the money to your mother, and then planning to squat in my home. Where I come from, we install deadbolts before letting grifters like you cross the threshold, I growled, every syllable heavy with infinite disdain. Vance's smile vanished. His expression morphed from smugness to discomfort, quickly igniting into defensive rage. He slammed his hand on the armrest and jumped up to match my height. Watch your mouth, Alara. Who taught you to disrespect your future husband like that? We were going to live together anyway. Why do you have to draw such a hard line between personal and communal assets? It's exhausting. The money stays in the family, he yelled, trying to use volume to mask his lack of leverage. I smiled bitterly, shaking my head at his deeply ingrained audacity. I don't have time to argue with a thief who steals from his partner to buy a world's best sun mug. Listen to me very carefully. You sold that property using a forged POA. I'll write off the fact that I had the misfortune of dating a con artist, but $100,000 of that wire transfer is mine. You will scrape it together and refund my account immediately. Every last cent. I pointed a finger dead in his face, my tone leaving zero room for negotiation. Vance stared at me, eyes wide with shock. In the script, he and his mother had rehearsed. I was supposed to be sad, resigned, and eventually submissive to their plot, especially since the engagement party had already happened and the invitations were out. He never expected me to cut through the noise so violently. Are you insane? I already wired it to my mom's bank downstate. How are you going to demand money back from an elderly woman once it's in her account? Think about what you're saying. We're about to get married, and before you even step foot in your mother-in-law's house, you're showing your true colors. A materialistic brat counting pennies with her husband's family. How do you think my mom will look at you? What will the relatives think? Vance unleashed a torrent of words, weaponizing reputation and honor to guilt me. Drop the cheap moral posturing, I snapped, cutting him off. Am I materialistic? Or is your family a pack of vultures? That $100,000 is my blood and sweat. It didn't fall from the sky to fund your mother's retirement villa. Tomorrow is Monday. The bank's open at 9 a.m. I want to see a wire confirmation hitting my account. If I don't, a police report for wire fraud, embezzlement, and forgery of a notary public seal will be sitting on a detective's desk. Vance's face went ashen. He took a step back, pointing a trembling finger at me. He knew my corporate ruthlessness. He knew I didn't make empty threats. You're threatening me? You have no shame. You think just because you have money you can do whatever you want? My family is so unlucky to be stuck with a calculating bitch who values a dollar over family bonds. His true, vile nature was completely unmasked. Exactly. Let's see how lucky your family feels when the feds freeze her accounts. I turned on my heel and walked away, refusing to look at his hypocritical face for a second longer. The brutal awakening stripped away any residual weakness. The man behind me wasn't my fiancé. He was a liability I had to liquidate. Following our explosive argument, Vance stormed into the bathroom and slammed the door. He emerged later in pajamas, crawled into the king-sized bed, and pulled the duvet over his head. Less than 10 minutes later, His rhythmic snoring filled the room. He could easily sink into a deep sleep after delivering a lethal psychological blow to the woman he was supposed to marry. His apathy repulsed me. The wall clock read 1 a.m. I sat motionless on the sofa, cloaked in darkness. The silence was so profound, I could hear the distant wail of an ambulance echoing through the downtown streets. My mind was a hurricane of disappointment, regret, and hyperspeed logistical calculations. His family wanted my River North condo. They sold the joint property confident that I would swallow my pride to save face, and then docilely open the doors of my $850,000 home for his entire clan to infest. They want to seize my assets without contributing a dime. In their dreams, I thought, grinding my teeth. A decisive counter-strategy took shape in my mind. I couldn't keep the condo. If I did, Vance's family would use every manipulation tactic in the book, from playing the victim and crying to relatives, to outright squatting to breach my sanctuary. The root of their greed was the real estate, therefore I would eradicate the root. I stood up and stepped out onto the hotel balcony. The biting autumn wind off Lake Michigan hit my face, clearing my mind with a sharp clarity. I pulled out my iPhone and scrolled to a name. Declan. Declan was a college alumni connection, a top-producing luxury real estate broker in Chicago. We had a solid professional relationship. I hit call. After 3 long rings, he answered. His groggy voice came through. Hey, Alara. What's going on that you're calling at 1 a.m.? Didn't you just get engaged today? Starting the honeymoon early? I took a deep breath, forcing my voice to be as calm and clinical as possible. Declan, I need a massive favor. Extremely urgent. My River North condo. I want you to pocket list it across your brokerage network right now. Tonight. There was a 5-second silence. Declan must have woken up entirely. Are you messing with me, Alara? You just gutted and remodeled that place with high-end Italian fixtures. It's a prime asset. Why a midnight fire sale? Are you in financial trouble? His tone turned professional. I'm dead serious. And completely sober. Push the listing live. I will authorize a 5% price cut below market comps. Priority goes to whoever can wire earnest money the fastest. I replied firmly. 5%? You know, 5% on that unit means leaving tens of thousands on the table, right? With a discount like that in River North, I'll have a bidding war by breakfast. What are the terms? The instinct of a seasoned broker kicked in. The absolute, non-negotiable condition. The buyer must pay 100% cash. No mortgage contingencies, no appraisals. Fast close at a title company this week. I don't have time to wait 30 days for a bank underwriter. Find me an investor with liquid capital. I'll bump your commission up a point. Call me at 9 a.m. with updates. I rattled off the terms with clinical precision. Declan sighed on the other end. He knew better than to question my judgment. All right, I get the urgency. 5% off for an all-cash quick close will have tech bros and foreign investors foaming at the mouth. Have your deed and ID ready. I'm waking up my marketing team now. Talk tomorrow. Thanks, Declan. I'm counting on you. I hung up. The night sky over the skyline was a starless black canvas, but the path forward in my mind was brilliantly illuminated. I turned back into the suite, flipped on all the glaring overhead lights, ignoring Vance groaning and rolling over from the brightness, and packed my overnight bag. I tossed the crystal engagement dress directly into the hotel trash can. With my small suitcase in hand, I walked out of the suite with my head held high, leaving behind a greedy fool drowning in dreams of wealth he would never touch. Dawn had barely broken, casting timid rays of light through the sheer curtains. I was curled up in a modern accent chair on the balcony of my own condo. I held a mug of black, unsweetened coffee. The bitterness slid down my throat, soothing the pounding headache from a sleepless night. This place held the memories of my single life, my independence. I had curated every inch of it, from the imported Italian leather sectional to the smart home lighting system. The thought of liquidating it to fend off a pack of grifters made my chest tight, but logic dictated it was the only way to amputate the infection. Right then, the doorbell rang aggressively, shattering the quiet morning, followed by heavy pounding on the door. Open up, Alara. Open the door. I know you're in there. Let your mother in. A shrill, grating woman's voice pierced through the hallway. I frowned, setting the mug on the glass table. I calmly walked to the entryway and checked the security camera panel. Corinne, Vance's mother, was planted outside. She was wearing a loud, bedazzled velour tracksuit. Her hair was tightly permed. At her feet sat two dirty burlap sacks, and next to her was a styrofoam cooler sealed with duct tape. A dark, questionable liquid was leaking from the cooler, pooling onto the marble floor of the luxury corridor. I took a breath, assembled an expressionless mask, and unbolted the door. I barely had it cracked open before Corinne shoved her broad shoulder through, pushing me aside to march arrogantly into the foyer. Lord have mercy, what were you doing in there? I practically lost my voice, yelling and bruised my knuckles, knocking. Wow, daughter-in-law, your mother-in-law comes to visit and you don't even greet her properly, Corinne hollered instantly. She didn't bother taking off her sneakers, which were caked in red Indiana clay, tracking dirt straight onto the pale, wide-plank European oak floors that cost a fortune to install. Furthermore, the burlap sacks emitted a nauseating stench, a mix of cured venison, pungent smoked sausage, and a damp, gamey odor that forced me to hold my breath. I stood with my arms crossed, leaning against the entryway wall, coldly observing the performance of the self-appointed new lady of the house. Corinne, what brings you to Chicago so early? Is something wrong? I asked in a monotone, pointedly not calling her mom as she expected. Hearing her first name, Corinne stopped dead in her tracks. She glared at me and dropped the sacks onto the floor. What kind of manners are those, girl? We celebrated the engagement yesterday with the family's blessing. You are to call me Mom. Using my first name is strictly forbidden, you hear me? She lectured, hands on her hips. Vance called me crying, saying you threw a fit because he sold that other place. I'll give him an earful later. I woke up before dawn and caught the first Greyhound up here, loaded with good country food for you both. And you give me this sour face? After how much I love you? As she spoke, her eyes darted around my expansive, open-concept condo. Her gaze practically vibrated with greed and calculation. She patted the custom stone veneer accent wall and clicked her tongue. Gotta admit, this place is huge and gets great light. Vance was right. What belongs to the wife belongs to the husband, and the daughter-in-law's house is the mother's house. This is a perfect place to retire. Anyway, forget about the other condo. I've made an executive decision. Starting today, I'm moving in here with you two to handle the cooking and cleaning so you can focus on your corporate jobs. Go get the guest room ready for me and get a spare fob copied so I can come and go. The sheer entitlement was clearly genetic. They genuinely believed that stealing $100,000 could be smoothed over with a fake apology, and their reward would be commandeering my luxury real estate under the guise of helping out. You are mistaken. This condo is my sole property. My name alone is on the deed. The concept of what's the wife's is the husband's does not hold up in a court of law. And as for you moving in, I never agreed to that, I stated, dropping the words like anvils on her delusions. Corinne's face darkened. She ground her teeth, glaring at me with the ferocity of a woman trying to intimidate a rebellious subordinate on day one. The war for the assets had begun. The air in the living room grew suffocating. Corinne, planted in the center of the room with her hands still on her hips, was breathing heavily, furious at my boundaries. However, her grifter instincts told her not to push too hard yet. She cleared her throat, deliberately ignoring my statement about ownership, and began surveying the unit like a general contractor on a site visit. She walked around the living room, dragging a rough finger across my white marble waterfall kitchen island, then scrutinized the recessed lighting in the ceiling. The more she looked, the more her face twisted in disdain. Let me tell you something, Alara. You might be a big-shot businesswoman, but your taste is sterile. This huge place and everything is white and gray. Your furniture is flimsy, not a single piece of heavy carved oak anywhere. It feels like a hospital. People will walk in and think Vance married a cheapskate who can't afford real decor. Corinne clicked her tongue, shaking her head in I remained leaning against the dining table, arms crossed, waiting to see how far this comedy act would go. She marched straight to the living room wall where my floor-to-ceiling built-in oak bookshelves stood. It was my sanctuary, holding thousands of dollars of industry reference books, first-edition novels, and curated art pieces. She slapped the woodwork authoritatively. These cheap shelves call a contractor tomorrow and have them ripped out. Do these books print money? Get rid of them to make room for my massive, custom Amish-crafted mahogany dining set I'm having trucked up from downstate. I've also commissioned a massive rustic bar cart for my collection of painted porcelain roosters. Now that brings class to a home. And on that blank wall will hang some giant, rustic, live, laugh, love signs and a big iron cross to bless the house. A home needs to feel heavy and stuffed to feel like a real family lives here. As she ranted, verbally bulldozing my sleek, modern space into a chaotic Midwestern flea market, she kicked my pristine indoor slippers out of her way. Her arrogance had breached the limit. Not only did she want to squat in my home, but she also wanted to erase my identity, turning my sophisticated sanctuary into a monument to her tacky taste. Let me repeat myself. This is my house. From the drywall screws to those bookshelves, I paid for it all. Nobody has the right to alter, destroy, or drag junk into this space. I stepped forward. My patience officially evaporated. The front door burst open and Vance rushed in. He was wearing the same wrinkled clothes from the hotel. He looked haggard and sweaty. He had clearly woken up, realized I was gone, and sprinted here. Seeing me and his mother squaring off in the living room, he immediately jumped between us, holding his hands up like a referee. Hey, what is going on? Why are you screaming so early? The neighbors will hear and call the HOA. Vance played the peacemaker, rubbing his mother's arm to soothe her. Seeing her son arrive as reinforcements, Corinne instantly flipped the script from aggressive invader to weeping victim. She practically collapsed against him. Look at your fiancé, Vance. I took a bus all the way from Indiana to check on her, giving her advice on how to make this cold box feel like a home. And she disrespects me. She wants to kick me out. She thinks she's better than us because she makes a corporate salary. She looks down on us country folks. Corinne dabbed at invisible tears with the sleeve of her velour jacket. Vance turned to me, his brow deeply furrowed in disapproval. His weak spine, always bending to his mother, was on full display. Without asking for my side of the story, he blindly took hers. Alara, what is wrong with you? Mom is older. She's from a different generation. As her future daughter-in-law, you need to be more accommodating. If she wants a bookshelf gone, tear it out. If she wants to bring her furniture, let her. We are her children. Compromising isn't going to kill you. Family comes first, right? Vance weaponized family values to force my submission to a home invasion. He truly believed that invoking his mother's age meant I had to surrender my kingdom. Their coordinated manipulation was laughable. Two absolute parasites performing at their peak. It was time for the kill shot, no more letting them play out their charade. I swatted Vance's hand away and stepped back to maintain a safe perimeter from the people actively trying to consume my life. I lifted my chin, dragging a razor-sharp glare across Corinne's fake crying face and Vance's indignant scowl. Your family values, Vance, are funded by my bank account. Let's recap last night. The property you illegally sold? Half of that was my cash. 100 grand. You stole my money to buy yourselves a house in Indiana and pad her retirement account. Since you two are such financial geniuses, let's balance the ledger. Corinne, the money is in your account. I demand you walk into a Chase branch right now and wire me back my $100,000 today, not a penny less. I articulated every word. My voice rang out, cold and unyielding. At the word wire back, Corinne snapped to attention. The weeping victim act vanished, replaced by the ferocity of a cornered badger. She slapped her thigh, jumped up, and pointed a stubby finger at me. How dare you speak to me like that? Money that goes into my account doesn't leave. You barely have a ring on your finger and you're extorting us? Have you no shame? You're 2 years older than my Vance. Having a handsome, young man like him is a blessing for a career woman like you. That $100,000 is my compensation for the burden of my son marrying an older woman? I'm holding on to it so you don't blow it. Corinne shrieked, the vile justification flowing out of her as if she'd rehearsed it for weeks. I stared at her, momentarily stunned by the sheer sickness of her logic. 6 years of corporate grind had just been categorized as an age compensation fee for her deadbeat son. Their greed had lobotomized their connection to reality. Mom is right, Alara, Vance chimed in, possessing zero shame. That $100K is your contribution to the family. Now that we're moving into this condo, why do you even need liquidity? You have a great job. This place has equity. If you need cash, just take out a HELOC, home equity line of credit. There are a million ways to get capital. You don't need to harass an elderly woman for a few bucks. You're being incredibly short-sighted, you know? Vance wasn't just endorsing his mother's theft. He was actively encouraging me to leverage my own home into debt to fund our lives while they kept my cash. To him, I wasn't a partner. I was a line of credit. Wow. You two are quite the team. I slow-clapped 3 times, a freezing smile on my face. Age compensation. A HELOC. Listen to me very carefully. Consider that $100,000 gone, but the price you are going to pay for it will be catastrophically higher. Don't think for a second you're going to sleep peacefully on my dime. I am going to show you exactly what happens when you touch my assets. With that, I turned around, walked into the master suite, slammed the door, and threw the deadbolt. I ignored Corinne pounding on the wood and Vance pleading through the door for me to come out and act civilized. I coolly opened my walk-in closet, selected my sharpest tailored blazer, and touched up my makeup with militant precision. The enemy had shown their hand. I didn't need to hold back anymore. The operation to surgically remove these people from my life was a go. After gathering all the necessary title documents and shoving them into my designer tote, I adjusted my lapels, took a breath, and unlocked the bedroom door. The living room was a disaster zone. Corinne was sitting cross-legged on my pristine leather sofa, loudly chewing an apple. Vance was busy moving the leaking, smelly styrofoam coolers to appease her. Seeing me emerge looking like I was heading to a boardroom, Vance stood up, about to speak, but I held up a hand to silence him. I have business to attend to. But before I leave, I have a final announcement regarding this property, I said, my voice dropping the temperature in the room. This condo currently has two massive outstanding debts with the Homeowners Association. One is a backlog of unpaid HOA dues and utility assessments since January. The other is a mandatory special assessment levied by the board to replace the building's main electrical grid, which failed code inspection. The total balance due immediately is $18,000. Vance and Corinne stared at me, eyes wide. The apple nearly slipped from Corinne's hand. I smiled internally and continued laying the perfect snare. If you plan on moving in here and acting like the owners today, or by tomorrow at the latest, you need to go to the building management office on the first floor and write a check for $18,000. If it's not paid, the HOA will legally shut off the water, cut the power, and deactivate the elevator key fobs for this unit. I have absolutely no obligation to clear that debt for people trying to squat in my house. Think it over. Without giving them a second to process the bomb I just dropped, I slipped on my heels and walked out the front door. The click of my heels on the marble hallway echoed behind me, leaving the mother and son drowning in panicked murmurs. I knew their pathology. They were terminally cheap. Faced with paying a massive bill, they would desperately try to dodge the responsibility. And that was the exact psychological vulnerability I needed to destroy them. The Uber Black dropped me off right in front of Declan's brokerage in the Loop. The moment I walked through the glass doors, Declan rushed out to meet me, flashing the million-dollar smile of a broker who just closed a whale. Alara, perfect timing. The pocket listing with the 5% discount went viral in our internal network within 2 hours. I vetted a young tech exec couple relocating back from Silicon Valley. They saw the virtual tour, loved the floor plan, didn't even need a walkthrough. Most importantly, they are liquid and ready to wire $800,000 cash today to secure it. How's that for speed? Declan beamed, handing me the client dossier. I smiled and nodded, a massive wave of relief washing over me. Just as I calculated, the steep discount on a turnkey luxury property was blood in the water for cash-heavy buyers. Flawless, Declan. Put them in the conference room. Let's execute the contract right now. Have the title company rush the paperwork simultaneously. I want this legally ironclad before the banks close. The meeting went incredibly smooth. The buyers were professional and thrilled with the expedited timeline. In Declan's glass-walled office, the final signatures were stamped on the earnest money contract. The moment the hefty wire hit my account as a non-refundable deposit, I felt weightless. All the pricing and deposit logistics were locked in that afternoon. We agreed that by Tuesday morning, the remaining balance of the $800,000 would hit escrow, the deed would record, and I would officially hand over the keys. This lightning-fast transaction effectively bricked up every exit for Vance's family. The real estate they were actively trying to steal now legally belonged to a tech executive. A brutal reality check was waiting for them. The city lights flickered on as the biting night wind swept through the grid. I rode the elevator up to my floor with a completely transformed mindset. I was no longer a betrayed fiancé. I was an auditor watching a failing company go under. This condo was under my control for only 2 more days. More than enough time to take out the trash. Stepping off the elevator, an atrocious smell hit me. It wasn't my signature citrus sandalwood diffuser. It was the stench of burnt garlic and cheap frying oil wafting from my door. I frowned and tapped my fob. The scene that greeted me almost made me laugh out loud. My minimalist living room had been transformed into a Greyhound bus terminal. Sitting on my expensive sofa was a leathery, deeply tanned man in his 60s chain-smoking Marlboros, flicking the ashes directly onto my white wool rug. It was Vance's Uncle Harlan, infamous for his day drinking. In the accent chair, across from him, sat a woman with sharp cheekbones, aggressively spitting sunflower seed shells onto my marble coffee table. Aunt Maeve, known for having the most toxic mouth in their county. In the center of the chaos strutted Corinne, looking triumphant. She had changed into a garish, sequined red blouse, acting like a mob boss giving orders. In the kitchen, Vance was wearing an apron, hacking away at some greasy meat. Smoke was billowing everywhere, coating my high-end custom cabinetry in grease because he had no idea how to turn on the hidden ventilation hood. When I walked in, all eyes snapped to me. Nobody smiled. Nobody welcomed me. Their eyes were full of judgment, entitlement, and a coordinated attempt to intimidate. I understood the play instantly. This was a hostile takeover. Corinne had called in reinforcements to apply group pressure, trying to establish dominance on day one, and break me into becoming the family maid. I walked in calmly, placed my keys in the tray, and headed to the living room, completely ignoring the uninvited squatters. I picked the one empty chair, sat down, and crossed my legs, looking at them like I was watching a bad sitcom. Aunt Maeve cleared her throat, spat a shell onto the rug, and glared at me. "Oh, Alara is finally home. Some fiancé you are, leaving your elders waiting for dinner until this hour. Where have you been sneaking around all day? Didn't anyone teach you to come home and help your mother-in-law cook and clean? Where we're from, a girl acting like you would have been set straight a long time ago." The aunt immediately launched her verbal assault. Uncle Harlan blew a cloud of smoke and nodded. "Damn right. What's the point of a fancy college degree if you don't know your place? Vance is the oldest son. Marrying him is a privilege. You need to fall in line and serve his family. Your mother-in-law was gracious enough to forgive your little tantrum this morning, and she called us up here to witness your apology. Now go fetch some ice water for the adults, then get in the kitchen and help Vance plate the food." He slurred slightly, the cheap beer already kicking in. Corinne stood with her arms crossed, chest puffed out, fully expecting me to drop to my knees and serve them drinks in penitence. The grotesque patriarchy of it all was fascinating. I wasn't angry or scared, I just smiled. A faint, mocking smile. I wanted to see exactly how delusional their demands could get before the wrecking ball hit. The air was thick with smoke and grease. I remained seated, entirely unbothered, making zero move to fetch water or enter the kitchen. My total apathy infuriated them. Aunt Maeve slapped the coffee table. Her shrill voice spiked. "Are you deaf? Your elders are speaking to you. Unbelievable. You barely get a foot in the door and you're trying to walk all over your mother-in-law. Well, as the matriarch's sister, I'm laying down the law. Corinne is too soft on you, but I won't be." Feeling empowered, Corinne added, "Maeve is right. A house needs a head, and a family needs structure. Listen closely, Alara. Starting next month, when you two are officially married, you will hand over all your credit cards, your direct deposits, and your savings passwords to me. Women are too frivolous. If you have access to the money, you'll just blow it on shoes. I am the elder. I know how to budget. Every month, I will give you and Vance an allowance for gas and coffee. The rest goes into a family trust that I manage. Any objections?" She was openly attempting a financial coup, demanding my entire corporate salary. I raised an eyebrow and leaned back. The audacity was entering cartoonish territory. They viewed me as a legally bound ATM and expected me to live off a stipend. But the clown car wasn't empty yet. Uncle Harlan crushed his cigarette out inside the pot of my expensive imported orchid. "The money thing is settled. Best to have one person manage it. Now, another thing. My boy, Jace, just got accepted into UIC downtown. I see your home office over there is huge. What a waste of space. Clear those books out this weekend. Next week, I'm bringing Jace up here to live in that room for the next 4 years. With Vance and Corinne here to keep an eye on him, I can relax back home. And since you're family, you'll cover his meals and laundry. We're family. We don't nickel and dime each other over rent, right?" I almost burst out laughing. Uncle Harlan was a master grifter. He not only wanted to house his son in downtown Chicago for free, but he also appointed me as his unpaid maid. They were carving up my real estate and my paycheck with terrifying ease, acting like it was already legally theirs. I glanced at Vance. He had just walked out of the kitchen holding a platter of meat. He heard every insane demand his relatives made, yet he kept his head down, not daring to object. In fact, he gave a slight nod, agreeing with his mother. His cowardice and complicity were the final nail in the coffin. "Is everyone finished?" I asked softly. The gentle tone contrasted sharply with their aggressive barking. The room fell silent. They stared at me in shock. They likely expected me to scream, cry, or argue. Instead, I beamed a radiant, agreeable smile that left them utterly bewildered. "I have taken note of everything Aunt Maeve and Uncle Harlan have taught me. You're absolutely right. Family must support each other. Turning over my finances to Mom? I totally agree. Clearing out the office for Jace to live here for 4 years? Consider it done. The more people, the warmer the home, right?" I replied with an exaggerated reverence that dripped with fake sincerity. I even leaned forward and poured Uncle Harlan a glass of water. My sudden, complete submission sent a wave of euphoria through the room. Corinne grinned from ear to ear. Aunt Maeve nodded smugly. Vance let out a massive sigh of relief. They genuinely believed their mob tactics had broken me, completely oblivious that my smile was the safety coming off a loaded weapon. The living room morphed into a celebratory feast. Uncle Harlan laughed boisterously, slapping his knee and praising me for finally getting some sense. Aunt Maeve looked incredibly pleased with herself. Corinne even walked over, picked up a piece of greasy meat with a fork, and dropped it onto my plate. Vance beamed from the kitchen, a portrait of a happy family painted with the brush of sociopathic greed. I stared at the meat on my plate, not touching my silverware. I cleared my throat, maintaining my agreeable smile, and introduced the fatal variable to their delusion. I am 100% committed to doing what's best for the family. But there is one tiny logistical hurdle we need to clear together as a united front. As I mentioned to Mom this morning, this condo has an $18,000 outstanding balance for HOA fees and a mandatory electrical repair. Unfortunately, building management slipped a final notice under the door this afternoon. The master bathroom pipes are corroded, and they require an emergency plumbing retrofit costing another $3,000. That brings the grand total to $21,000, payable to the HOA by tomorrow at 5 p.m. If we default, they cut the power, shut off the water, and deactivate the elevators. Since we are all here as one big family, I think it's only fair we all pitch in to protect the family home. I spoke fluidly, never breaking eye contact. The moment I finished, the chewing stopped. Uncle Harlan's cigarette hovered frozen near his mouth. Corinne's smile evaporated. The festive atmosphere plummeted into a suffocating, terrified silence. I had just stress-tested their united family with a $21,000 invoice. Pretending not to notice their panic, I started delegating. Logically, Mom always says there's no yours and mine in family. Uncle Harlan, since Jace will be living here rent-free for 4 years, maybe you could chip in $5,000 toward the maintenance? Aunt Maeve, since you're the elder overseeing things, maybe a $2,000 loan? And Mom, since you have the $200,000 from the other condo in your account, you could front $10,000. Vance and I will scrape together the last $4,000. Doesn't that sound equitable? I tilted my head, looking at them innocently. Their faces drained of color. Aunt Maeve was the first to bail. "Oh Lord, my stomach is acting up. Where am I going to get thousands of dollars? I'm on a fixed income." "This is a you problem," she stammered, rapidly backpedaling. Uncle Harlan wasn't far behind. "I just paid Jace's tuition deposit. I'm tapped out. Brothers and sisters help each other, but your housing debt is your problem." He completely washed his hands of the situation. I looked at Corinne. The woman sitting on $200,000 of stolen cash was suddenly fascinated by the floorboards. I locked that money in a 1-2-month CD. If I break it, I lose the interest. With your corporate salary, you can cover $21,000 easily. Vance, you're the man of the house. Go take out a personal loan. Leave me out of it. She tossed her son straight under the bus. I smiled bitterly. Just as I hypothesized, when there were assets to steal, they were family. When there was a bill to pay, they were strangers. Everything was perfectly aligned. It was time to deploy the contract. An awkward, heavy silence blanketed the room. Uncle Harlan and Aunt Maeve busied themselves picking up sunflower shells to avoid eye contact. Corinne glared at Vance, mentally willing him to fix it. Vance, sweating profusely, looked paralyzed. He knew he was broke after giving his mother everything. I sighed, playing the role of the devoted, exhausted wife. Well, I understand everyone has tight finances right now. Let's let Vance, the future head of the household, take charge of this. My soft tone instantly relieved their panic. I went to my bedroom, opened the safe, and pulled out a stapled document. Delegation of HOA authority and assumption of financial liability. It was a custom contract my corporate legal team drafted up that afternoon. I walked back out and placed it on the coffee table right in front of Vance. Every eye locked onto the paper. "What's this, Alara?" Corinne asked suspiciously. I smiled warmly at Vance. "Honey, I know you feel emasculated living in a condo that I bought. To ensure you feel like the true master of the house, and to keep the family harmony intact, I had this drafted. In this document, I am legally transferring all management and decision-making power regarding this condo over to you. Starting tomorrow, you are the legal representative of this property. You can authorize contractors to tear out the shelves, approve new furniture deliveries, and authorize Jace to move in. That way, Mom and the family will feel respected." I appealed directly to his fragile ego and his lust for control. Vance's eyes lit up at the words decision-making power and legal representative. His desperation to be the boss completely short-circuited any critical thinking. "Are you serious, Alara? You're giving me control?" "Of course. But with authority comes responsibility," I said, flipping to the second page. "To make this legally binding with the HOA, you just sign here, officially agreeing to assume sole personal liability for the $21,000 debt to the building management and contractors. Your signature replaces mine on the ledger. I give you the power. You handle the logistics. Fair?" Vance skimmed the first page about rights, completely ignoring the dense legal jargon about debt assumption. In his small mind, gaining control over an $850,000 asset was a steal. He figured signing for the debt was just a bureaucratic formality, and once we were married, he would just force me to pay it anyway. Greed blinded him. Corinne nudged him hard. "Sign it, boy. Sign it quick before she changes her mind. With this paper, we run the house. We'll just tell the HOA to wait until after the wedding, and we'll use her paycheck to clear the debt. Her money is our money." His mother's whispering cemented his doom. Without a second thought, Vance grabbed a pen and scrawled his signature across every page. The scratching of the ink was the sound of the trap snapping shut. I picked up the executed document, smoothed it out, and smiled in deep satisfaction. I locked it back in the safe. The pact was sealed. Tomorrow, a gentle push would send their entire empire crashing into a brick wall. The dinner ended with them in high spirits. Uncle Harlan and Aunt Maeve left the condo thrilled, having raided my liquor cabinet and taken 2 bottles of Macallan as gifts. Corinne decided to sleep over, claiming the guest room so she could supervise the demolition contractors in the morning. The next day, to maintain the illusion, I started packing my books into boxes. "Mom, call the best carpenter you can find. This wall is perfect for your mahogany cabinet. I'll box these up to make room. The day after tomorrow, when the furniture arrives, we'll throw a welcome party for Jace. Sound good?" I said with terrifying sincerity. Corinne nodded, grinning. "Now you're talking sense. Keep this up and the family will thrive. Finish packing and get some sleep. I'll handle the contractors tomorrow. Just leave your spare key fob with Vance and don't worry your pretty head about it." I took a cold shower, washing off the tension. The betrayal had cut deep, but I only had to endure one more night. At 11 p.m., I stepped out of the bathroom. Vance was already in bed, humming to himself. He felt like a conqueror. He reached out to grab my waist, but the smell of greasy food and beer disgusted me. I pushed him away coldly. Sleep. I'm exhausted. I have to be up by 5 a.m. to finish packing my things. My icy tone shut him down. He rolled over and was snoring within minutes. I couldn't sleep. I mentally reviewed the timeline one last time. I texted Declan. "Everything is a go. Make sure the buyers are at the title company by 8:30 a.m. The reply was instant. "Locked and loaded. See you at closing. Congrats in advance." I smiled in the dark. By sunrise, I would be free of this parasite forever. I woke up at 6 a.m. while Vance was still dead to the world. I dressed in a sharp navy power suit, pulled my hair into a sleek bun, and applied flawless makeup. I loaded all my vital documents, jewelry, and my overnight suitcase into my car downstairs. Back in the condo, Corinne was snoring on the sofa. I left the spare key fob on the kitchen island with a sticky note. Vance, use this for the contractors. I'm headed to the office. My final message to the people about to step on a landmine. I walked out without looking back. The title company in the loop was already bustling at 8 a.m. The tech exec buyers arrived right on time. The process was swift and clinical. I reviewed the settlement statement. My name, the wire instructions, everything was flawless. I signed the deed, transferring ownership. A physical weight lifted off my shoulders. The buyers signed with a smile. The moment the escrow officer stamped the documents, the buyer's agent confirmed the wire. My phone buzzed. Deposit. Plus $800,000. The transaction was complete. The capital was safe in my fortress. Thanks for the seamless transaction, Alara. Have a great week, the buyer said, shaking my hand. The pleasure is mine. Enjoy the views. I've cleared out my personal belongings. Whatever is left, feel free to dispose of. I replied with a smile, setting the stage for the finale. I stepped out onto LaSalle Street. The city air felt incredibly light. My money was safe. My autonomy was restored. It was time to go back and watch the fireworks. I took a cab back to the condo around noon. I used my building access card one final time. My heart beat with a steady, lethal calm. As I walked down the hall, I heard the sounds of chaos hammers banging, heavy furniture dragging, and Corinne's voice screaming orders. I pushed the unlocked door open. It was a disaster. Corinne, standing on my sofa in her tracksuit, was directing Vance like a rented mule. Drag those boxes of books out into the hallway. I'm putting a recliner right there for my afternoon naps. Vance, sweating through his shirt, was dragging heavy boxes across the floor. One ripped, spilling my expensive art books onto the floor to be trampled on. Aunt Maeve had returned and was in the corner, wrapping my Murano glass vase, a corporate gift from a client in newspaper. This is in the way. I'm taking it back downstate. It'll look great on my porch. Alara makes too much money anyway. She can buy another one, she muttered. Their brazen theft was staggering. They truly believed the paper Vance signed gave them diplomatic immunity. I stood in the doorway, arms crossed, watching the pathetic circus. A slow, genuine smile spread across my face. It was time to pull the plug. I clapped my hands loudly, 3 times. The sharp cracks echoed over the noise. Everything stopped. They all snapped their heads toward me. Vance froze mid-lift. Corinne glared down from the sofa. Aunt Maeve quickly hid the vase behind her back. They stared at me, the woman in the power suit projecting absolute authority. I walked into the room and hit the motorized blind switch, flooding the room with harsh midday sunlight, illuminating their mess and their stunned faces. What a lively little renovation. But I'm afraid you're all wasting your time. My voice rang out, crisp and lethal. Corinne recovered her arrogance quickly. What are you doing back here? We're setting the house up to our standards. I told you to leave the fob and go to work. You're in the way. Get out, Vance chimed in, dusting off his hands. Let Mom handle the layout, Alara. I signed the legal paperwork. I have the management rights. Did you come back just to micromanage me? He smirked, fully believing his piece of paper made him a king. I threw my head back and laughed out loud. I pulled a photocopy of the agreement Vance signed from my bag and, right in front of them, ripped it to shreds. Vance, you absolute idiot. Did you actually think a printout gave you the deed to an $850,000 property? The confetti of paper fluttered to the floor. Vance looked at the pieces, his face twisting in confusion. What are you doing? That was a binding contract. Are you backing out? Backing out? I locked eyes with him. Listen to me. And listen carefully. I do not own this condo anymore. And it has absolutely nothing to do with your family. At 8:30 this morning, I sat in a title office and sold it to an investor for $800,000 cash. The deed has been recorded. The funds have cleared. You are currently vandalizing a stranger's property. Dead silence crashed down like a concrete block. Nobody moved. Corinne turned to stone on the sofa. Aunt Maeve slowly placed the vase on the table. Vance stumbled backward, his eyes blown wide with sheer terror. His master plan had just been vaporized in 4 sentences. The reality check hit them like a freight train. The air in the room was suffocating. Vance's family seemed to undergo a collective mental short-circuit. They couldn't process the fact that the gold mine they were currently looting belonged to someone else. Corinne was the first to detonate. "You're lying. You lying bitch. How dare you sell it? Where the hell are we supposed to live? I don't believe you. You're just trying to scare us out of the house," she shrieked, violently rejecting reality. Vance lunged toward me. "You're bluffing, Alara. That's impossible. The deed was in your name, but we're basically married. You can't liquidate an asset like that without my consent. Tell me this is a joke." His voice cracked, high-pitched with panic. I stepped back, maintaining a sterile distance. "I don't joke about my portfolio. You have a smartphone in your pocket, right? Call the HOA management office downstairs. Ask them who the registered owner of Unit 42B is. I already handed over the keys to escrow. The new owners will be here in about 15 minutes for their final walkthrough. Do you want building security to drag you out for trespassing?" My clinical, legally precise words shattered their last shreds of denial. Vance slumped against the drywall, completely defeated. No. No. It can't be. If you sold this place, where do we go? My mom. She accepted the cash offer on her house in Indiana yesterday. We have to sign the closing docs this weekend. She sold it so we could consolidate our lives up here. If she backs out of the sale now, she gets sued for double the earnest money. We're homeless. That piece of information genuinely surprised me. Corinne's greed was more terminal than I had calculated. In her desperate rush to squat in my Chicago penthouse, she had liquidated her only shelter. Their staggering overconfidence had driven them straight off a cliff. The newlywed condo? Sold. The Indiana house? Sold. My luxury condo? Gone. A spectacular chain reaction of self-inflicted destruction. Right on cue, heavy footsteps echoed in the corridor. The door swung open, and 3 burly building security guards stepped in, followed by the tech exec couple. The new owner frowned at the boxes in the hallway and the circus inside. "Miss Alara, what is the meaning of this? We are here to take possession." "Who are these people?" the buyer asked sharply. I turned to her with a polite, apologetic smile. "I apologize for the mess. These are some former acquaintances who were just leaving. Feel free to instruct security to assist them in vacating your property." The head of security, catching on to the situation, stepped forward with his hand on his radio. "All right, folks. If your name isn't on the new deed, you need to vacate the premises immediately. Any resistance will result in CPD being called for trespassing and vandalism." Hearing the word police, Aunt Maeve panicked. She grabbed her knockoff purse and sprinted out the door, abandoning her sister without a second thought. Corinne, however, dropped to the floor, kicking her legs like a toddler. "You're throwing me out on the street. You called hired goons to evict your own family." "I'm not moving." Vance, hyperventilating, tried to argue with the guards as they grabbed his arms. "Let go of me. I have a signed agreement." "Alara, tell them." "The paper I signed said I'm the legal representative." He was still desperately clinging to the anchor that was dragging him under. I looked at him with zero pity. "The paper you signed yesterday. The copy I ripped up was mine, but the original is sitting in the HOA's legal department. You really should read what you signed, Vance. It wasn't a property management agreement. It was an assumption of liability. You legally volunteered to pay the $21,000 special assessment and plumbing fees. A copy is also with my attorney. If you don't leave peacefully right now, the invoice for that debt, along with a police report for forging a notary stamp to sell my other property, will be hand-delivered to the Chicago Police Department Fraud Division. You signed your own financial death warrant. You have zero rights here." He finally understood. He went completely mute. His body went limp as the catastrophic magnitude of his stupidity washed over him. The security guards escorted Vance and his screaming mother out of the apartment. The heavy door clicked shut, severing the chaos from my new life. The infection had been legally and surgically removed. The following days were incredibly peaceful. I moved into a temporary, high-end corporate rental, blocked all their numbers, and focused on my career. Despite my boundaries, they were relentless. A restricted number called me a dozen times. I knew it was Vance, using burner phones since he had been kicked out. I finally answered, staying silent. Alara, please listen to me. I know we messed up. Please, for the sake of what we had, help us out. Mom and I are living in a Motel 6 by O'Hare. We're bleeding cash. Her blood pressure is through the roof. The joint condo is gone. The Indiana house is gone. Could you just float us a loan so my mom can get an apartment? I swear to God I'll pay you back. His begging exposed his pathetic reality. When he had leverage, he used family to try and enslave me. Now that he was ruined, he resorted to financial panhandling. I hung up and blocked the number. A week later, he managed to bypass security and showed up in the lobby of my corporate office. He looked malnourished, wearing a stained shirt. He tried to rush me near the elevators, but building security intercepted him. Alara, you can't be this cold-blooded. Give me back the $100K. My mom already spent it. You're rich. You don't need it. Help your family, he screamed, trying to publicly shame me into compliance. Without breaking stride, I pulled out my phone, turned the volume all the way up, and played the audio recording I had secretly taken in the hotel suite during our first argument. I sold our Gold Coast condo. I wired it all to my mom's account back in Indiana. His own smug, bragging voice echoed through the marble corporate lobby. The onlookers immediately understood what was happening. Vance turned beet red, trying to back away, but security held him tight. Public pressure doesn't work on me, Vance, I said calmly. I pulled a thick manila envelope from my briefcase stamped by the Cook County Circuit Court. The civil lawsuit demanding the return of my $100,000, plus legal fees and punitive damages, has been officially filed. All the evidence regarding the forged power of attorney and wire fraud is with the authorities. Get a lawyer. His face contorted in absolute dread as the legal reality crushed him. I turned on my heel and stepped into the elevator. That was the final face-to-face interaction we ever had. The next few months played out in the courtroom. Faced with the audio confession and a mountain of banking paper trails, the judge ordered Vance's wages to be aggressively garnished to repay the $100,000. But the damage went deeper. News of his felony-level fraud investigation reached the HR department at his logistics firm. Deemed an unacceptable liability, he was fired with cause. Tragedy loves company. Corinne, desperate to make a quick buck to escape the motel, took her $200,000, plus whatever she salvaged from her Indiana home, and dumped it into a guaranteed return real estate project in Florida she found on Facebook. It was a massive Ponzi scheme. The developers vanished overnight. She lost every single penny. They were now trapped in a labyrinth of lawsuits, trying to recover phantom money from ghosts. Thousands of miles away from their misery, I started a new chapter. I used the capital from the condo sale to relocate to Monterey, California. I needed the ocean air. I bought a stunning, minimalist condo perched on a cliff overlooking the Pacific, complete with a massive library, a sanctuary where I, and only I, called the shots. On my first morning there, I brewed a cup of pour-over coffee and stepped onto the balcony. The salty breeze whipped my hair. Watching the sun break over the crashing waves, I felt a profound, untouchable peace. The crisis had been hell, but it forged my independence in fire. Through sheer ruthlessness and a weaponized knowledge of the law, I had protected my empire. A wide-open path lay before me, and I was the sole author of the journey. And so, ladies and gentlemen, we conclude this dramatic saga. Perhaps it teaches us that in any partnership, especially marriage, transparency, and mutual respect are the only viable foundations. You can never weaponize family values to mask parasitic greed. Those who design their lives around exploiting others will inevitably trigger their own destruction. We also witnessed the terrifying competence of a modern woman. Faced with ultimate betrayal, rather than dissolving into tears or submission, she went cold, ran the numbers, and used the legal system as a scalpel to excise the tumor. Life, ultimately, balances the scales. What isn't yours, no matter how hard you scheme, will slip through your fingers. But the empire you build with your own two hands will always be an unbreakable fortress. Live with integrity, maintain your independence, and always keep your legal documents locked down. Thank you for your time.